everyone. My name's Aaron Couch. I'm from The Hollywood Reporter. Thanks for coming out. And please welcome the show creator, Marc Maron. Hey. We also have executive producer, Michael Jamin.
Michael. Is your mic on, buddy?
Let's see. Yeah.
There you go.
And executive producer, Sivert Glarum. Sivert. Excuse me.
Sivert Glarum.
So, Mark.
Yes.
That episode has aired. Did you have a conversation about your mother before or after?
Did I give her the heads up?
Yeah.
That I was going to give her venereal disease?
Yeah.
Yes, I think I did. She seems okay either way. I did give her the heads up that, yeah, I did. What I was more concerned about was the conversation about her boobs, because I knew that, the STD thing was a stretch, but the boob conversation actually happened. So I didn't want to betray her confidence, and she's like, "Nah, I don't care, Mark. Do whatever you want." And so that's the way that went.
Is that your policy that, how often do you give people a heads up on stuff like this, whether it be on the show or your podcast when you tell something personal about them?
I've been learning lessons about that recently. Because in my mind, the difference between fictionalization and what didn't happen, I think that if I surround it with enough fiction, that those moments that may be inherently real about my relationship, that the people who are involved will be able to detach from it. Because in my mind, it's like, well, who knows but me and you? But they tend to take it personally still. And, I've had to rebuild a bit with my father and with my friend Steve. And my brother's coming up. But I did. He's in an episode, but that's completely fictionalized. And the emotions of these things are real, but it gets a little tricky. And I don't know if everyone deals with this or if people don't base either what they write or their shows on real relationships. But I always think that enough of it is not real that they should be okay with it. But they're not. And yeah, some patching up had to be done with my old man, but my mother's okay. I think my brother will be okay. My friend Steve was not good, but that was last season. I think we're okay now.
Now, I have a question for you guys. Mark's such a force of nature, right? So what is your role in kind of shaping that? Can you describe how you kind of approach this season, what you do, once you get a hold of it?
When we sign on for the job, our goal, we said to Mark right from the start, is we want to make the show, we want to help him make the show that he wants to make. And so it's really about getting his voice into the show and just helping him realize his vision.
Yeah, and standing there in the writer's room and watching me go like, I can't say that. I can't say that. And then we fix it.
Yeah, one time it was, Jam, I eat fucking chocolate ice cream. I eat chocolate ice. How much does he eat chocolate ice cream this scene? And I said, well, what about vanilla? I can do vanilla.
And when the idea of the STD episode came up, it was, I think Mark had an interview. He was running a little bit late, and we came up with the idea in the room. And I was very excited to pitch it over the phone because I thought it was a home run. So I go, we want to do an episode where your mom gets an STD. And first thing he says is, no. And because, a lot of it, so much of it comes from Mark's life. And if the exact events don't, the emotions are real. And I think going from last season, I think Mark experienced a lot of, turbulence with people in his real life. So he was a little more cautious the second year, but then we wind up doing a lot more stories that were way more fictional. So,
well, that was interesting because that particular thing was, for some reason, I had forgotten that Dave Anthony, who's in the show and is also a writer, that this is a real issue among seniors. So like once they told me that, I'm like, all right, we can give it to her. We can give her the STD then, if it's a real thing, and I felt more comfortable about it. I think my initial reaction was that, well, isn't that a stretch? And then no, it turns out not.
I should also say Dave Anthony showed up to the set that morning with pink
real
eye.
Pink eye.
And so we just wrote it into the episode. Yeah. And we kept him like arm's length.
It was like, yeah, the entire set was like, just don't touch me. Yeah, and we were like, what are we going to do? Because we got him on camera. It's like, can you see it? And Joe, the DP, is like, yeah, you can see it. So we're like, all right, well, I guess it's going in, and it sort of made perfect sense. It really tied the episode up well. We're all very, very happy Dave had pink eye now in retrospect.
So that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that you would say no to things, but a lot of it, if you do say no, it's because you don't feel like it rings true or it didn't happen.
Well, yeah, it's a matter of ringing true, and also, like, I think that last season, because I was so panicked about so much, I was definitely ready to do what I was doing, but I had not done so much of it. I had not done any writing for television or acting for television or producing for television. And, I sort of built what I do on a level of authenticity that was very, very important to me. But this season, I was up against the problems that was causing me. Like there were some episodes in the first season where the emotions between me and Jen are like, intense and volatile and disturbing, but very genuine. And I think that as we wrote, I became more confident about the writing and with these guys and with the guys in the room. And also, I think I got a little better as an actor, and I was able to sort of pull back and make choices around the emotions that were real, even if the story was not entirely real. And that helped out a lot. I just felt more comfortable with it. But it took a little coaxing. But, ultimately, like, you get into a second season, and my biggest fear was, like, I don't live that big a life. So where are all these stories going to come from? And these guys are like, well, you just make them up. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. This is television. We can't make anything up. And we figured out a way to do it. We figured out a path to do it because, we did need stories. And that was my biggest concern about going into the season, was getting those stories broken before we, getting those scripts done before we start shooting.
One of the, I think, standout episodes this season is when you go to couples therapy. And it has a very painful ending. There's a breakup which is based on real life, and
exactly.
Okay, well, inspired me. You went through a breakup.
We did break up,
and you talked about it on your podcast, and the speech you give in the show is similar. When did you know that was going to be a part of it?
When I was with her, she didn't want to be in it anymore. She didn't want to be represented in it anymore, and the network didn't want it to be a romantic comedy. So those episodes were constructed story-wise before we broke up, and the breakup was much different. But so it doesn't quite imitate life. But the weird thing about that episode is that we went to couples therapy, and that happened. That's based on reality. So now I was concerned about my therapist. We went to a therapist, and because I had to talk to him about it. So we go to this therapist, and we're with him as a couple, and he's like, well, sometimes with couples, my wife's also a therapist, and we're like, this is ridiculous. And sure enough, it happened. His wife came in, and we would see them both separately. That was based on reality. And when that episode aired, I had to give my therapist a heads up. I'm like, the episode about you guys it's not you guys, but it's based on this, and I just want you to know that he watched it. There was that moment in therapy, because I still see him alone, where I'm like, so what'd you think? He's like, well, yeah, I understood why you were concerned. But, he's a pro. He had to say it didn't bother him. And, so I imagine he was being honest. He seems okay with it.
You've got so many great guests on this show, and I think one of the best this season was Ray Romano.
Great.
He was hilarious. Now, how do you kind of decide? He turns out to be somewhat of a jerk in the episode, or kind of makes you into his assistant a little bit. So, what are those conversations like with him or with you guys beforehand?
The truth?
Yeah.
Well, that part. We needed somebody of a certain level of celebrity for that to work, and we had originally thought of a lot of different people, and celebrities are busy, and it became sort of a panic because we didn't know who we were going to get after a certain point, because we'd gone through a lot of our first choices, and I know Ray a long time. And we started out together, But, because he's so nice, he was not the guy we thought of initially. And then when we were able to get him, he was so thrilled to play against type that, in watching the episode, there couldn't have been a better choice. And it was really, like, he was thrilled to do it. I mean, he likes acting. He likes to challenge himself. And there were moments where we had to pull him back from being more of a dick. And it really was an amazing thing how things work out like that.
Yeah, that was another one based on just a little kernel of truth from Mark's life. You had that incident with John Hamm after you interviewed him.
Right, and that's who we reached out to initially. And John Hamm came to my house and he interviewed me, and it was the first moment where I realized, like, all these people are coming to my garage, and John Hamm actually was the first one to sort of hang out. He smoked one of my girlfriend's cigarettes on the sly, and he's like, give me my number, and maybe we can hang out. And so, like, now for weeks I was like, I got John Hamm's number in my phone. And I really didn't know, like, what do I do with that? Can I just call John Hamm and go, like, what's up? I got nothing to do. You want to go have something to eat? And I answered that to myself with, no, you idiot. You don't just call John. What are you going to do with John Hamm at a taco place? I don't know, just talk. Are we friends? So that was sort of, that was the problem with that. Never did call him. Never did. I don't talk to too many people. I could call them, but then there's rejection involved. Like, what if John Hamm, not unlike not being able to do the show, goes like, I can't do tacos today. Well, how many times do you call back? Yeah, it's like, and then, what do I do? Like, if I go through 3 of those and we actually have tacos, when I'm like, so glad you made time for me, John. I know this is weird, but I just wanted to eat tacos with you. What's going on? How's your amazingly huge career going? What movies are you working on?
But you do seem to know just about everybody. I mean, are there? Do you have a wish list of, if there is a season 3, of who you might get on?
Yeah, there's always, it's weird with that slot, with the podcast slot, and deciding, who's going to be a bigger part in an episode. Because, yeah, I know a lot of people, but, we don't all hang out. I think somehow because of the podcast that, I've built a lot of goodwill out there, and people, do want to hang out, and they like doing the podcast, so they like, playing themselves. And it's really a crapshoot. I mean, there's a long list. I mean, I've done, 500 of those podcasts, and 490 of them involve people, and they're all different people. So it really comes down to, we have a production schedule that's very tight, and you're looking at 2-day windows, 3-day windows to hope that somebody's available. So it really is based on that. And, and also like having Dave Anthony in the writer's room and being such a good foil for me, and I've known him forever, it was very helpful. But really it comes down to, like, hopefully, someone can do it. And, we lucked out this year, and it's a very diverse and interesting bunch of people that were able to play themselves, and the people that played bigger parts in the episode were great. So, yeah, there's a big wish list, but when it comes right down to it, it's like, can you do, these 2 days? No. All right, well, we'll get back to you. So it really is about that. But a lot of people are very willing to do it.
And you've talked about, obviously, this is done on a tight schedule, tight budget. Is there anything that you would really like to do that maybe, or you've dreamed of, that you haven't been able to do on the show because of those constrictions?
Well, it really comes down to, like, how much time we take per each episode. I think that if we were to have a little time per episode, we could be a little more deliberate in framing and in location and pacing things out and being a little more conscious of taking time with scenes. And because, like, when you're doing it and I'm in every scene and you got 3 days to shoot a whole episode, you've got to make your day. And, I think a little more time on that end would be great. You guys?
I think our big expenditure this year was shooting in a trailer park. So, yeah, the budget is really tiny, and basically...
That cost a lot of money?
No, because you remember, we shot in a trailer park, but our producer was very proud that we got a trailer for free, because the guy who was living it got his 3rd strike, so he was sent back. And that we saved $50 that day. It was a big deal for us.
And the only reason I knew about that trailer park was that weird movie I did. Where the hell was that?
Santa Clarita.
Oh,
Yeah.
my God. that was crazy. We spent a whole day at this trailer park, and like those people are way off the grid, and we're there for like what were we there for 2 days or a day?
2 days.
2 days. So eventually these people start coming out of their trailers, with some big ideas. There was one guy.
They all have screenplays, too.
Yeah.
They came out, seriously, I get out of my chair. They set us up with, director chairs. We got up, I went up, came back, and there's a guy from the trailer park sitting in my chair right in front of the monitor. All right. He's calling the shots now. I'm not telling him to leave. He lives there.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, this is, you're new to TV. You two have been doing TV forever. I mean, how does this show differ than the other stuff you've been involved in?
Well, working for IFC is great. It's a very streamlined process, and having Mark in the room playing himself is just great because you don't have to get caught up on, would this character ever do this? You have the guy right in the room who can say, yes, no. Maybe in the 70s and in the 1970s, you could do things on network TV that were really interesting and challenging, but that's no longer the case. So it's really, really rare opportunity for a writer to kind of write something that people could really relate to and, really find kind of challenging. So it's really a godsend in that way.
And also have time to find an audience. It's the expectations are different. So, niche audiences are where it's at. That, you're not, with IFC, they're incredibly supportive, and the whole process between Fox Studio, the production company, IFC, they had notes, and we discussed things, but there was never lines drawn. So the risk was really like, is this gonna find its audience? And even with the podcast audience, the thing still has to exist on its own as a television show. And the expectation, for IFC in terms of what that audience looks like, it's not gonna be, 2.5 or 3 millions of people. So to do well, and also just for my career in general, I'm pretty specific, and it's interesting that people are coming to that TV show because I'm still a fairly discoverable thing. I'm still somehow, off the grid. Like when they put the first season on Netflix, there were literally people tweeting and emailing me like, "Who are you?" And which is encouraging in a way that because you get sort of spoiled, between your Twitter following or the podcast following or then IFC. But if you really think about the numbers there, most people have no idea who I am, which is great because to sort of come on a full season of a produced television show on Netflix with a guy that you've never heard of or seen before and have it be something that's sort of like, this is great, is an amazing thing. And it's a very bizarre period we live in that you think that everybody can find you, and they can. People have access to you, but the truth is that you get insulated in that. There's still a huge world out there. I'm not Kanye. I'm not. Yeah. But it's still like people like when I tour, like I can't. Like if we even post the episode, like I will post where I'm going to be. A lot, and I'll talk about it on my podcast, and then right after I perform there, some idiot will go like, "I didn't know you were coming to St. Louis," and I'm like, "Well, what do you want me to do? Come to your house? I don't know what else." So it's a little deceptive, when you get kind of caught up in like, "Wow, I have all these people that know," and most people just don't know. So to sort of speak to like whatever's going on network or whatever's going on anywhere, there are comedies on television now that. You can literally turn your TV on and just be like, what the fuck is this? And that's great. It would have never happened before. And it's given us a lot of opportunity to do what we want to do.
Speaking of people that may just turn on the TV and see you, what do you guys hope they think if they just see 5 minutes of your show? I've never heard of it before.
Well, that the stories and the comedy stand up, that somehow or another I'm relatable enough. Like, obviously, I'm not relatable to everybody. There's definitely, and I can live with that. I don't hold it against them. But that people can, that the stories are human enough that they can identify with something. I have to assume that, I am a grown man with no children, and I have problems mentally and emotionally. And I have to assume that there's plenty of us out there. So, and that they will find the show.
But
I think the show feels, I think what people, respond to it is that it feels real. It doesn't feel, in my opinion, doesn't feel overwritten. It's not joke, 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 like network sitcoms, which we have no problem signing up for, by the way. But I think...
Are you pitching for another job? Can we just
start
wait
it
till
out
see
there.
if we get a season 3? We might get a season 3. Don't.
We got
all
a
right.
season 3. We're going to get a season 3. So, but I think people respond to that. It feels real. It feels like you're really watching Mark's life. And to be honest, it's 90% Mark's life. It's very close.
But it's weird. But a lot of it isn't. And even people that listen to my podcast are like, I didn't know that's how it happened. It didn't happen that way.
Well, your relationship with your mom, that's...
Yeah, that's very-
certainly your dad.
My mother, she emailed me the other day. She's like, I want to meet Sally. And they would get along. I mean, Sally, it was so close to that role. It was disturbing. But yeah, it is weird to do it the way I'm doing it. That people who know me very well from the podcast, actually know a lot of details. I've been a little more diplomatic about, details I put out about my life that involve other people. But for them to sort of come to the show and see it as a separate thing, that's been a challenge for me. And I'm more self-conscious of it than they are usually. I mean, they like the show, they like the stories. They're not saying they're going, that didn't happen. So that's good.
Well, I've got a question from one of the audience members. I hadn't heard this before, actually, but Chris F. is wondering, Mark, he asks...
This is an AA meeting?
Yeah. Chris F.
Yeah.
How crazy is it that you and Louis C.K., who were once roommates, now have shows that are about your daily lives? Was there ever an early conversation that it might happen?
We weren't roommates. We were. I was sort of roommates with Dave Cross for a while. I used to sleep in his bed when he was at his girlfriend's, and he's coming up on an episode. That was he's great in it. That was a funny moment in casting. Because we had written it for Seth Rogen because it was sort of there was weed involved, and Seth couldn't do it because he had a movie or something at the relatively last minute-ish. And, so I reached out to Dave, and he said, yeah, I'll do it. And they sent him a script with Seth Rogen's name on it. So Dave shows up. He's like, I kept wondering who I was in this script. And where Seth is... Yeah. But he was fine. He was hilarious. But I wasn't roommates with Louis, but Louis and I go way back. And Louis was always. I think Louis always knew on some level that he was going to do something. Maybe I don't know. There was a conversation I had with Louis years ago where he was all upset about a particular comic coming on the scene and getting opportunities because this comic was attractive, and. He was mad about it. He was like, the comedy is not for them. And he was just livid about it. And I was like, well, what's the problem? He's like, I want to get on Letterman before I'm fat and bald. And that was like his biggest concern. But after a certain point, Louis turned out to be incredibly capable in a lot of different areas. I think the real question was like, what's going to happen to Mark? And I don't know that Louis ever had a tremendous amount of faith. I think he thought, eventually I would just, destroy myself one way or the other. But it has been interesting since, we've sort of gotten back, as friends and whatnot, that I'm in another episode of Louis that's going to be on June 16th. And like his whole use of me is very interesting. Like in the first time he used me last season, he took my side, like he played me, like in our conversation. He was the right, yeah. He took the lines that I had in our podcast, and he did it again. Like the thing I don't ever understand about Louis is he's like, I really want you to do this scene where you do this thing. I'm not going to spoil it for you. And most of the time when Louis gives me scripts, I'm like, how is this funny? I don't understand how this is funny. Like I don't get it. And like the first time I was on a show, people loved it. And I'm like, when we were doing it, I didn't know what was funny about it. I'm like, how is? And I just got to trust him because like I texted him the other night. He's like, I'm cutting the scene right now with you, and I'm like, how is he? He goes, oh, it's great. I'm like, how? How is he? I don't understand. But got to trust Louis, right? Louis knows what Louis does.
When you see that episode, then do you get it, or do you
Yes.
not even get it then? Yeah, yeah. Once you saw it.
Yeah, he, you
Yeah.
know, like, and he's very clear about it, about, you know, these beats where the funny was. Like, because my thing is, you know, like, if you give me too much free air, I'm going to start doing something, you know, talking or whatever. Like, you know, yeah, yang, or, you know, finishing lines. And there's not a lot of improvising with, it seems, with the bulk of what Louis is doing. So there was a beat there that the beat, the one beat obviously read funny, and there was a little improvising at the end, but he was like, you know, I kept jumping the beat, and he was like, shh, we're going to do it again, just let that sit there for a minute. I'm like, why that? Yeah, and you don't question the genius. So it worked out.
So how does that work on your show? If in your words you say that if you give you too much space, you'll just, as you say, yammer. Is that
Well, this
a
season
problem?
was like, well, I told these guys, you know, when I realized exactly what the priorities were, you know, when you don't have that much time to make your day, and that, you know, I'm in every scene, was that, you know, coverage really becomes very important. So, like, and how anything's working, I mean, that's their job. Because a lot of time a TV director, it seems, and I had a lot of great directors, they got a lot of things to worry about and a lot of angles to catch it on. So with my acting, you know, I told them, and I told Dave Anthony, I said, look, you know, watch it. You know, if I'm stepping on a beat, or if I'm moving too fast, or I'm filling where I shouldn't, and, you know, I can make different choices. And you know, just tell me. I'm not going to yell. So they were on top of that. They were always on the monitors, and the writers were on the monitors. I think you know, sometimes it annoyed directors, but you know, it was definitely a directive from me. You know, like, watch me, and if you've got a different way to do this, let's do it that way.
We've got another question. This is from Andrew.
Andrew W.
Just Andrew. I recently watched your HBO half-hour comedy special from the 90s, and I hardly recognized you. When did you make the shift, if any, from frantic stand-up to the sit-down, talk-it-out comedy guy you've become? He also says, Boomer lives.
Boomer does live, hopefully, in a nice lady's house down the hill from me. Well, I think that shift, like, you sort of get beaten up with age eventually. But, really? Okay. The shift just sort of evolved. I mean, like, when I was doing comedy in the 90s, you know, I was aggressive, I was self-righteous, you know, I thought I had a point. You know, I was moving around a lot, I had long hair, I was strutting. And at some point, oddly, I think for most of a comic's career, anyways, for my career, you know, you put a lot of energy into pretending not to be afraid. I mean, that's, you know, 80% of your job is to, you know, to get up there and appear confident and deliver your shit. And at some point, you know, not too long ago, you know, 25 years in or 20 years in, you know, that fear genuinely went away. And I'd watched Bill Cosby himself, you know, at some point in the last 5 years. And what struck me about it, having not really watched it closely, was that it was really a pivotal thing for me, was that he's just telling stories, and he's deciding, you know, what's funny. You know, it's not like this joke's got to work. You know, Bill Cosby is sitting down casually and deciding what's funny for himself. And that, you know, because he's not afraid and he's confident and he's fucking Bill Cosby, that works. So I thought, well, geez, I'd like to sit down. And, you know, there's no reason I can't sit down. So I just started sitting down. And I, like, for years, like back in the old days, if I ever sat down on that stool, it was because I'd given up. And like, I was doing so badly with the audience, I didn't want them to think that I was failing. So I will pretend to be as comfortable as possible. So if a show is going horribly, I would sit down and just pace myself out and just kind of lay into that bomb. You know what I mean? But what's evolved is that, you know, I began to realize that, you know, obviously I'm not comparing myself to Bill Cosby at all, but there is a power in sitting down. And there was something about either frantically moving from side to side, which some comics do, you know, in bigger rooms, or just standing still at a microphone, which was just sort of uninteresting after a while. And like a lot of times if I'm standing still, like, you know, I feel like I got to have the mic, like I need things moving. So when I sat down, like it somehow evolved into this weird perching, you know, like I'm almost like on stage now, and this just sort of happened organically. I'm like leaning off a stool with my hands like this, like kind of tucked, and that, that's as comfortable as I can be. I'm not pretending to be comfortable. I am sitting, just out of fear of moving around too much. But I'm sort of like, okay, let's do it, and that's how that happened. It was just a natural evolution.
Nicotine.
Yes.
Well, for you guys, what did you know about Mark before you signed on for the project? What was your awareness of him, or how did you know him?
I didn't know about the podcast, but I knew about Air America. I'd heard him on Air America.
Fucking.
And I saw him in this Air America documentary.
Oh, Frantic Mark.
Right, Frantic Mark.
Frantic prima donna Mark.
But like we met with them, and I think we really connected as far as like I really liked his point of view. I think his experience in showbiz is a lot of people's experience of showbiz. Sometimes you're kind of on the cusp, and then you kind of sink down to oblivion. And so definitely related to that. He's definitely, I think we share a certain level of bitterness, so it definitely related to that.
He actually, we met him for the first time at a restaurant for a hotel, and Mark said, "So you guys think you can write for a bitter, depressed, out of work comedian?" And we just like looked at each other. You're fucking kidding me? That's us. So I think it was a good match. He was also eating steak and eggs. I was like, that's an interesting choice because he's got food issues.
Yeah, well,
Steak and eggs is very Midwestern.
I know. Well, I travel. I don't know why I chose steak and eggs. Sometimes you just got to have steak and eggs. You just sort of like, how often do I eat that as a Jew? And you're at a place, steak and eggs, it's classic. And, I don't know. So, why am I talking about this? Yeah, well, that was before the cholesterol issue. Okay. I like steak and eggs.
What have your conversations been like as far as showing Mark do stand-up on the show? Are we going to see that?
It happened this time. It was weird. The first season, by some divine providence, Louis took a year off. It was the greatest thing. It took everything I had not to thank him. Dude, you're doing me a solid. Because we live in a weird kind of predatory culture that just wants to compare things and start fights and everything else. And I knew in my heart that, Louis and I live very different lives. We are both comics and we both chose single camera, but I knew that the comparisons were going to be inevitable, and it was sort of a panic that I had. Like, we're just going to have to, I'm just going to have to learn how to live with that. But the fact that he was off was good. And then I just decided that first season that let's just stick with the podcast. I mean, the comic thing has been done. Seinfeld did it, Jerry does it, and it is what I am, but we've got a more interesting component with the podcast and with that type of microphone. That the intensity of shooting the fake podcast with just me on that mic, affords me a lot of freedom to not have to be funny, to be philosophical, to emote in a different way. So we took advantage of that. And in this season, I think there's one episode where I'm on stage, and then there's another episode. Oh, 2 episodes, I guess, right?
We do go to 3 comedy clubs this year.
3? Oh, yeah.
Caroline.
Oh, in the Comedy Store, but I didn't go up there. Yeah, well, yeah, there's one episode where I go do a Horrendous Road gig, and that gets a little weird. That's a surreal episode. And then there's the other one where, the one I directed, we go with Caroline, right, in Tomorrow's.
Right.
Where she does comedy.
Yeah.
So the life is represented. But the one I directed, the joke, was pretty gnarly. It's about joke theft, and we had to get that right because it's such a loaded thing for comics. And that was interesting. That was compelling, and that was because I ended up on stage in an alt room on that one, right?
Right at the end of that one, yeah.
Yeah. So we involved the life this time, but we didn't use the device of the stand-up to transition or to use it as stand-up as part of the narrative. Yeah.
Now that people have seen the show, I mean, it's very different than Louis. Are you beyond worrying about those comparisons now, or do you?
I am,
still
and
chase you?
it really didn't happen the first time. You know, there's always going to be some douchebag that's going to be like, Maron's just Louis, West Coast. Maron's just the worst Louis. You know, him and I are so fun to, so different, in terms of how we approach material and how we approach, television. Just, he's doing a completely different thing. And, after the first season, I was happy that it just didn't stick, and it wasn't. And even this year, it's not happening, and it's great. It's fortunate because, and I think I can suck it up a bit if I know where it's coming from. But, the AV Club can go fuck themselves. But that aside, the weird thing is that it's like, comics, when you put them on television, they're going to figure out some way to use their persona to be on television. It's been going on for decades. But the people want to pit people against each other. But we're fine. And, he's still doing much better than me, so don't worry about Lou.
Well, we've just got time for a couple more questions. Cassandra is asking, what's the biggest lesson the three of you learned from season 1?
For me, it was to get those scripts done before we started shooting.
Yeah, that's something we stay. Mark has got to be involved in every line of this script, and so.
And that's not because I'm self-involved. That's because budgetarily, we can't create an ensemble cast. So and there's no B stories. So it's like, that means that I'm in every scene of every episode. It's not because I'm like, no, I must be, and it wasn't like that. Go ahead, sorry.
The biggest lesson is no tight shirts. That was season 1. Mark was in a lot of tight shirts, and he didn't like that.
That wardrobe person bothered me. Like I'm in somewhere between a medium and a large, and it seems that both times that we shot, I was a little pudgier than I wanted to be, and that first season was just sort of like, oh God. This season was better.
And before we let you go, I know people, you haven't even finished season 2, or we haven't seen all of it, and people hate this question usually, but where would you want season 3 to go if we do have one?
Did you guys think about that?
IFC, baby. Put it on the air.
Well, I think that we're seeing, we're a couple of years behind, and this is me dealing with a very, small tick in success. I imagine that we want to attempt to have me have an adult relationship for real. I imagine we'd want me, to have a little more money and not being able to know what to do with it. And so I think we'll just follow the course we've been on, which is, maybe a year or two behind where I am now. Yeah. That's all right, right?
Well, that's good. So you feel like that's a very positive thing.
Well,
for
yeah,
you
because
personally.
as I feel better about myself, which is not on all levels, but, emotionally and psychologically, I'm not great, but I do know, that because of the podcast and because of the show and because of the events of the last 5 years, that I know I'm doing something that I can be proud of and that seems to have relevance to a lot of people. So whatever chunk of self-esteem I was missing throughout my life in those areas has been filled in. So to sort of play myself at a different level of aggravation or fear as somebody who has less of that is good. You never want to be the guy playing yourself in the immediate situation you're in, especially if it's a bad situation. Like I once did a one-man show about my divorce and separation. I was just workshopping it, and it was happening during the divorce and separation, and it was not meant to be seen by anybody. And this Time Out reviewer said, the amazing thing about the performance is that Maron seems to be experiencing exactly what he's talking about. And the emotions are very genuine. And, and I was like, why was he even there? And I am going through it. And, it didn't seem to be a positive thing. So, having some hindsight and being able to have some control over choices emotionally and otherwise is beneficial to the creative process.
Well, great. Well, thanks so much for talking with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming.